Alright, hi guys, welcome to this week's video where we're going to be picking up where we left off from last week's Intro to Nursing exam reviews. This is first semester stuff, so we're going to pick up with asepsis and precautions. So there's a difference between medical versus surgical asepsis, okay? And the primary difference is that medical asepsis is clean technique. So you're going to be washing your hands, putting on just regular gloves, okay, and cleaning your equipment with the Clorox or Sani wipes, okay. Surgical asepsis is when the area needs to be completely free of microbes, okay? So you're not just putting on those regular latex or nitrile gloves, whatever you guys are using in the hospital. You're using the specific surgical ones that come in the little packaging, okay? So mainly the difference is if it needs to be something like really invasive like surgery or putting in a Foley, you're using surgical asepsis, okay? Whereas medical is just general kind of standard of care. Now precautions, there are the standard and the enhanced precautions. We talked a little bit about enhanced precautions last week where I gave some helpful acronyms like MTV, like on air with MTV, and PIMP for droplet precautions, stuff like that. You can reference the previous video. Standard precautions, this is used for everybody, okay? Regardless of diagnosis, regardless of, if they have C. diff, regardless if they have MRSA, whatever, everybody's on standard precautions. Do not let the test, writers trick you guys into not picking standard precautions, okay? It's always standard precautions for everybody. Okay. So I'm going to breeze through this part because I felt that even though nursing school loves to highlight this, it's not very relevant on testing purposes. It's good to know for how the disease gets passed along. It's basically just stating how that someone is infected, they're in an incubator and they leave that person and it transmits through droplets, air, into the next person breathing in the particles, and then that host becomes infected and it repeats themselves. This is kind of like the TLDR Spark Notes version, okay? I'm not going to harp on it. It's not very useful for testing purposes. Defenses of infection, also not very high yield, but it's basically just saying the body has different ways of fighting the infection, right? Like your normal, flora, like saliva, your skin's a natural barrier, mucosa, mucus, earwax, and also how your body's inflammation, like a fever and stuff, helps fight off infections, right? Which is why we don't always want to treat a low-grade fever. We are okay with letting it ride for a little bit, but if it gets too high, we have to treat it, right? And nosocomial versus community acquired infection, you may get one or two questions on these on the NCLEX, but I don't think they're very common. Basically, nosocomial is just talking about that it is coming from the hospital. The patient got it from us, the healthcare worker, whereas community is just talking about outside the hospital, okay? So community acquired pneumonia versus ventilator acquired pneumonia would be nosocomial. Nosocomial also has exogenous and endogenous, which is basically just talking about where the microorganisms coming from. So for example, exogenous is for example, salmonella. It stems from outside the body, and it's if you eat raw chicken, you get it. So don't eat chicken sashimi, right? Endogenous is when the person's normal flora becomes altered and overgrown. So this is usually things like a yeast infection, right? Or your body naturally has these microorganisms, but once they're, for example, a person becomes immunocompromised, they can go rampant, right? That can be a type of endogenous infections. Cohorting patients. So when do we use this? We can use it for patients that are, similar diseases in terms of their isolation, right? Like a flu patient can be paired with another flu patient, Patients that have private rooms, though, are the airbornes. These are your COVIDs. These are, everything in that on air with MTV, that acronym, okay? And like I said earlier, in the previous video, the negative pressure room comes with the airborne thing because the engineering team has to make sure that it has a negative vacuum of air pressure, so no air comes and leaves the door from the patient. Okay, all the air from the patient's air room stays inside. Positive pressure is the opposite, right? It's good for people who have immunocompromisation, and you want all the outside air to not come in to the room. Okay. Oh, whoa, sorry about that. I guess my computer lagged a little bit. So we're going to briefly go over SBAR, which is basically talking about how you give report to, or not report, but how you communicate with other healthcare professionals, right? So you guys probably heard of how this is, the acronym, and then you guys can just read it through. I'll give you guys a few seconds. I don't want to waste your precious time on this stuff, but it's basically talking about like why you're calling, some background information. Some people like to throw in their latest vital signs in here and like what was done so far. Some people also throw like assessment here in assessment, depending on like if it's a recent one. Like for example, you can say like in assessment, they were trending like 98 over like 62 BP, but now they are like 108 over 72, right? And then you can be like saying, yeah, so after the fluid bolus, their SIRS, their sepsis protocol is they're doing better on that front. Communication and behavior, there's verbal, nonverbal. This is like pretty self-explanatory. I never thought like this part was very difficult. You guys can just read it through, and if you guys have any questions, you guys can drop them in the comments below. But like I said, I always treated this stuff as like, don't be a jerk, right? Like be aware of how you act with your body as well as what you say, and just be professional. Some minor notes is that you don't use abbreviations when charting, but this obviously varies place by place. People still write like BID, QID, and stuff like that, but we're starting to see these getting phased out a little bit. Okay, now some legal stuff, which is Nursing Code of Ethics. Honestly, I would just like go over this maybe once or twice before the NCLEX. Know some things like veracity, benevolence, things like that. That would be useful, but honestly, like this is not something that's high yield on the board exams. More legal stuff that I feel like also is good to know, but not highest yield. Just like, good stuff to know, but never really anything super testable. Okay. So this is your functional assessment. This is basically what we're saying, how well a person can perform their activities of daily living, right? This is a holistic approach. So we're factoring in, for example, their physical limitations, such as, if they're an amputee, if they have a stroke history, can they walk up the stairs? Do they have any residual weakness? If they have, depression, are they too tired or too depressed to even get out of bed to, wash themselves, brush their teeth, feed themselves? You need to kind of be aware of all that stuff, because as a nurse, you're the one spending more time with the patient, so you need to bring these concerns up, right? You need to say, hey, I don't think we can discharge this patient today because they're homeless. They haven't figured out where they're going to live, right? Like that's been a very real thing that people like nurses had to say. Be like, doc, I don't think we can discharge yet. We need to put them with social work. These are some health models. Honestly, the most important one for exams is like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, because this will basically go like this basically dictates your priority when you're choosing those like which one would you do type first kind of questions. It's based off Maslow's a lot of the time, but the other three things are more like being a good professional. So yeah, I'm not going to spend too much time on that. Now this is a bit more testable, I would say. So it's talking about health prevention, right? And there's 3 tiers, as you can see on the screen. Primary, I like to think of it as preventative. P for preventative, right? Secondary, I think of screening. S for screening, right? You want to screen early for like those blood pressures, cancer screenings, colon cancer screenings, breast cancer screenings, things like that. And tertiary is when something has already happened to the patient and you're trying to get them back. So it's like rehab in a sense, right? Like back to their normal. And the TA before me that wrote these slides, they put the normal in quotes because it's basically just saying it's not going to always be 100% back to what they were, right? If a patient has a stroke, they may not always go back to their original standard of living, right? Like they may have residual weakness, as we have talked about several times in this lecture so far. So it's bringing them back to where they can be, to the best of where they can be, right? Okay, so a little practice question. If Julie exercises every day and eats healthy, she has gone for an annual physical for almost 15 years and is very communicative with her healthcare team, what stage of prevention is this? It is primary. And then we're going to leave it off here. It's going to be a really quick video. Most of it was like legal stuff, but it's good to know. And then just a little bit more like nursing background information. Good luck studying. Happy holidays.